Hi, folks. Welcome to Lassoing Leadership. I'm your co-host, Garth Nichols.
And I am Jason Rogers. Lassoing Leadership is a result of our love of leadership and how Ted Lasso tackles some really tough issues. We talk about these issues for about 20 minutes. We talk about our favorite characters of the episode, leadership nuggets of gold. We also take a stab at renaming each episode just for fun. And then we leave you with a leadership challenge based on our learnings.
Yeah, and this podcast basically allows us to bring these leadership lessons and challenges to light, to life, and to learn from them through our discussions with incredible people that we've had on the podcast in the past. And, and like you, Jason, my co-host. But today we welcome Dr. Taylor Armstrong, a great old friend of mine who many moons ago has worked with some of my students back at a different school where I was at. I don't know if you remember that, Taylor, but that was a long time ago.
I remember well.
Yeah. So it's so great to have you on the show and for this episode as well, because it's called Headspace. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce us to your listeners and what you do.
So I just want to first say thank you so much, Jason and Garth, for giving me the chance to come on the podcast. I've been a long time listener and admire the work you do, and was really quite thrilled to get the invite.
Well, thanks.
So I'm a child psychiatrist by sort of trade and training, and have been doing that for a little bit over a decade. And in the last 2 or 3 years, I've gotten interested in working with athletes, and that includes at the youth level, at the varsity level, at university, as well as some young adults. And I've been lucky enough to come into contact with even a few hopefuls for the upcoming Olympics in Paris 2024. And as well as being a physician and a psychiatrist, I know that a big proportion of your listenership are educators, and I'm an educator here with the University of Toronto in the Faculty of Medicine, and work with medical students and residents, and have for many years, and on occasion some younger school students as well, as Garth can remember.
Yeah. Did I nail this guest or what, Jason? Come on.
I have a question off the top, though, Dr. Armstrong. Is Fieldstone's job your dream? It sounds like you have a dream job already, but is that the kind of work that you've always wanted to do? When you watch her, is that inspiring?
I remember watching the show the first time around and having her introduced as a character, and was really thrilled, because it was kind of like, it was like all three of my loves coming together, like sort of mental health, sport, and Garth knows I sort of have this sort of side hustle writing, and so I love sort of script writing and dialogue, and sort of how these kinds of shows come together. So it was like this great collision of these interests of mine. But I don't know if I would say that sport psychiatry and sport medicine was always a dream of mine. It was sort of like just the winding road of our careers. It takes us to interesting places, and this is just where the path pointed in the last little while.
Wow, the winding roads of our careers. I love that. And I think sometimes we hear from listeners who are aspiring to be leaders, and they wonder how you get from point A to point B. But I agree with you, Dr. Armstrong. I think it's a bit of a winding road that leads us, hopefully led by our purpose and our passion, which eventually ends up, in a work life of gratitude. So anyways, that's amazing.
Listen, our listeners should also know that Taylor was an OG listener before we actually launched the podcast, because of his, as he is just listed, because he's a wise man. We got him to listen to this podcast right off the bat. So Taylor's been here from the start, which I really appreciate. So thank you. Speaking of listeners, Jason, you been hearing anything?
Oh, Garth, I have been hearing from a lot of people this last little bit, so I want to share a couple bits. First of all, we've got a huge guest announcement, not taking anything away from Dr. Armstrong, so I'm not going to talk about it very much, and I can't say anything right now, but I'll give a couple hints. This guest knows a thing or two about soccer and leadership, and has an exciting sounding last name. That's all I can share, Garth. So I'm just going to leave it with you and Dr. Armstrong for a little bit. We also heard from our basketball coach here at Rundle, Laurel Adolph. She's the coach of the Cobras, who you beat unceremoniously about a month ago. We flew out to Winnipeg. But to her and her team's credit, they're all heaping praise on your girls and what they provided in insight. And it got me thinking that maybe we should invite, Laurel and the girls from Rundle College on just to have a second run at that. What do you think, Garth?
Oh, 100%. That would be so fun.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, one of our recent episodes was also a leadership challenge episode where we counted down the different leadership challenges, and pleased to hear from some of my colleagues that they've taken on one or two of them. So I'm going to get some
Nice.
details and hold them accountable to that, because I did say, I can be your accountability coach.
Yeah,
So
it's
so
hard.
there you go.
And finally, Garth, I heard from a friend of mine, Joy Ashford, who's on the East Coast of Canada and is a teacher, and she left a nice comment on our Apple page. And here's what she said. I thought I'd just share it directly. As a teacher who eagerly and willingly wishes to lead, all the while steadfastly avoiding the responsibility of leadership, I recently found my way to Lassoing Leadership podcast. Now here I am ready to rewatch Lasso and whisper your words into my current leadership team's heads. Lasso style. Over the course of my past 23 years in education, I've had strong leadership and not so strong leadership. What I've come to find, much like Ted, is caring isn't enough. You need to care. You need caring and action for leadership to really forge its way. Go for it, Jason and Garth. And I think that's a nice setup for a little bit of what we're going to do today.
Yeah, that's great. So let's jump into our summary of the episode, which is something that Taylor recommended to us right off the bat, even before we started the podcast. So let's jump into our episode. This one is called Headspace. Take it away, Jason.
So yeah, here we have one. Ted wants therapy but hates it. There's a couple really amazing moments in there. Nate wants to be the wonder kid but doesn't want to, act like it in leadership. Keely wants and loves Roy, but she needs her space. Rebecca wants to meet her online mystery man, but doesn't want him to get too close. It seems to me that everybody, except for maybe Fieldstone, and Dr. Armstrong, be interested to hear your thoughts on this, is in their own heads, and they all need a little bit of space, hence Headspace.
Oh, amazing. Great summary. So many good themes in there, so many good sort of nuggets that Taylor can pick up on. So, Taylor, who is your favorite character in this season, or specifically in this episode?
I'll go with the episode, and I know that Jason's going to pick up on the sort of the magic power of an imaginary whistle. So I'm going to leave our man Roy Kent to him. But I would say in these conversations about favorite characters, someone who tends to get lost a little bit is actually Ted himself.
Good one.
And I'm going to go with Ted this week because I think he shows a really incredible range of sort of emotions and even in his coaching, he shows a range on the practices during this episode. Ted's really like in this middle of this sort of daunting, wonderful battle, and sort of he knows the help as he needs the help, Jason. He knows that sort of walking off of the field in the middle of a match, like consumed with anxiety, is not sustainable in this job. And yet, by the same token, there's this big part of him that thinks that, maybe that's better off than what's sort of frightening about learning what else is out there, what other truths are out there. And so sort of seeing him navigate this throughout the episode and sort of show this range of emotion and defense mechanisms is really fascinating.
Oh, Dr. Armstrong, while we're on that, the Fieldstone Lasso moment at that first counseling session when Ted comes in is just brutal. Like, he is not kind in any way. He is, aggressive and mean, and really out of character for Ted, generally from like the written character. It did resonate with me because I've done a little therapy myself. I remember the first times being in thinking, what am I doing here? This is not working. Is that, in your practice, or what you see in practice, is it common for people who enter therapy for the first time to have that type of reaction? I'm asking for myself, but also for the listeners who might be thinking about, getting support down the road and how they're feeling about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the go-to or the most common reaction. I think for the most part, people are usually at a place where they're ready to accept help and looking for a different way through whatever challenges that they're facing. But it certainly happens. It certainly happens in my work as a psychiatrist working with children and teenagers, because often it's other people in their lives who are pushing them for change, like whether they're parents or whether they're teachers, or in the world of sport coaches, or their sports staff. So I come up against that as well. And I see it all the time. At the other side of my office, I've seen it lots. And I've experienced it too. I've put in my hours, as the patient of therapy through the years, and I know how threatening it can feel to open yourself up and be vulnerable, and to do it with somebody who you may be meeting for the very first time.
Right on. Well, thanks for that, Dr. Armstrong. Garth, we'll switch gears just a little bit. I know we're going to come back to sports psychology in a moment, but let's talk about your new flavor of the day. Who's your character?
Well, building off of what Taylor was saying, my favorite character in the show is actually Colin, because it seems to me that he has been very successful in that sort of either it's self-therapy or he's been to therapy. So I really admire him in this episode. A couple of reasons. When he is absolutely demolished by Nate in front of the team in such a cruel way, he has a mantra, and he said, "I am a strong and capable man. I'm a strong and capable man." And I think he turns to Beard and says, "That's my mantra." I say to myself. And when he confronts Nate about his worry that, did I do something to upset you? Like, that is a brave thing to walk in to, especially someone like Nate, and he does it in a relatively safe, nonchalant manner. He doesn't bring in a sort of a storm of emotions when he does it. So I really appreciated that. And he's a character that emerges and becomes more significant throughout this season and later seasons. And I think this is one of these episodes where Colin really comes to life. And also Beard, this is just between me and you. And he says, "Do better." And then he miraculously disappears on Nate. So there's an element of stoicism in here, and I've spoken about stoicism in the past couple of episodes. So I really liked Colin for that, and I really liked that episode, that sort of one with Beard. What's Roy Kent doing for you this time around?
Well, as always, right? But just this past week, I recently read an article about a man in Milan who got in a fight with his wife. I don't know if you read about this. Apparently it's from a couple of years ago, but he got pretty upset and walked 420 kilometers before he cooled down and came home. But Roy only needed part of a practice to figure out he could do better and be a better partner with Keeley. And I can't get over his character development, his ability to live and learn and lead. And with that, I think that's all I need to say. Roy Kent's the man, and he continues to prove it. So let's get on to our leadership lessons. Why don't you jump in here, Garth?
Yeah, sure. So I loved all the sessions with Sharon Fieldstone. I know you identified one where Ted was really upset, but there was one where the first one in this episode is he comes in and he's like touching things, he's doing the bobblehead thing, and so when do we start? And she turns, "We already have." I just love that scene. So Taylor, I know you have some familiar background with not sports psychology, but sports psychiatry. So I thought we'll ask you a couple of questions from your perspective, maybe draw on the episode a little bit. But what is the difference between sports psychology and sports psychiatry?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's so much overlap in many ways, and so I don't want to dwell too much on the differences, but I think sometimes in mental health care there can be a lot of confusion out there. People's roles, people's backgrounds, and so some of the differences between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, particularly in sport, are both sort of the way that they came into the work and the kind of work that they do. So there's a very different educational background. Like, I'm a medical doctor, a physician by trade with a specialty in psychiatry, as opposed to a psychologist who, has a PhD in clinical psychology. The scope of our work can be a little bit different. I can do some things that a psychologist may not be able to do, and there are some things that they do much better than I do. And but it also, this confusion can tip into just the idea of a therapist. Like, a lot of different people can be therapists, whether you're a psychiatrist or a psychologist, a social worker, or sort of someone who's done a different diploma program. So it can be confusing for sort of the lay person to sort of know who these different mental health professionals are. And I think it's important to sort of, to understand what those lines are. But a lot of the work is similar. So I do therapy with my athletes in the same way that Dr. Sharon Fieldstone does it with Richmond FC. So, yeah.
Taylor, do you ever find in your practice, as we see in the episodes, that sometimes what the role is of a coach on a team, pushing athletes, challenging athletes all the time and supporting them, you ever find that as we do in the episodes, as I said, that in conflict with your, like, the role of a sports psychiatrist? I'm just thinking the way that Ted's trying to build the team, the way that Sharon sort of swoops in, and all of a sudden you've got Danny Rojas saying, "Football is life, but it is also death." Like expanding and changing the nature of a player's approach to the game. Do you ever find yourself in conflict with that, or?
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the unique things about sort of mental health work in sport. And it's interesting, you look at the show and of all the people who have gone through Dr. Sharon's door. Like, it started with Danny, and Keely even took Jamie one day, and Ted's been in there, Colin's been in there. But the show doesn't actually show you the sort of the meat of the conversations that they have. It's sort of in its own very quiet way, it models sort of the importance of confidentiality. And I think that that's really key, particularly in sport, because there can be really competing interests at play.
Yeah.
And are we trying to find an athlete help because we want to appease a fan base, because we want to score more goals, because we, for whatever reason, favor them for the spot on the team than somebody else? Whereas someone in Dr. Sharon's position, like, you need to strip all that stuff away and make it just about the athlete and their interests. And you've really got to work hard to create boundaries with all of those other people that may be involved. Now, having a conversation with the coach at the end of it and saying, like, this is what's coming out, this is how performance is being impacted, or this is why this athlete needs to take some time away from the sport. Those conversations can be really useful, but with an athlete's consent to do so.
As a sports psychiatrist, what do you think is important in someone who occupies a position of leadership, either on a team or otherwise? We've got a lot of people who listen to this podcast who aren't educators, and they occupy positions of leadership. A psychiatrist in general, or a sports psychiatrist, what's important for someone who occupies a position of leadership to know or to understand about that role, and why they might be interested in leveraging that in their own practice?
I think that what I do that parallels what an educator or a leader in any different spot would do is just the idea of meeting people where they are. And I think Sharon does this so well. Like, we know that she's been lurking this whole season, and yet it's taken till episode 7 for Ted to actually kind of like walk into her office, or Higgins' office as the case is, and sort of show up for the work. And so, in the clinic where I work, we've done some training in family therapy, and sort of at core to that is this acronym called our PACE. And so PACE stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And I think Sharon in this episode really demonstrates sort of the value and power of acceptance. Sort of where are people at in their skills or strengths and weaknesses? Where are they at in their stage of readiness for change and their willingness for change? And sort of Sharon just lets Ted come in and sort of isn't heavy-handed she probably has sensed that there's some work that Ted could do for a long time now. And every once in a while, like the episode prior, like she checks in on him, "How are you doing?" And he sort of gives his standard pat sort of oh shucks response with too many words. And even in these interactions in this episode, we see him develop from sort of distracted to angry to then sort of like accepting. And she's just kind of there at every stage of the game. So I think as leaders, we've got to accept where people are, meet them where they are. And acceptance doesn't necessarily mean that we sort of like are accepting that the decision and the place they're at is healthy and constructive. But we got to accept that they're there as a starting point for them to trust us and move forward with us.
I love that, because it's what spoke to me about this particular episode was that in this episode, you really see Dr. Sharon Fieldstone leading up, like helping Ted be a better leader. And I think that's something that, for me anyway, is like really important to always remember, is that just because you are a leader doesn't mean you're done in your learning, in your need for support, in your need for well-being, all those types of things. So I love that she really sort of manifests that in this episode. and she shows such patience, whereas most organizations don't have the opportunity to show that amount of patience in terms of, I will wait for Ted to come to me. I will wait till he is ready. Sometimes we are forced to keep moving and moving and moving. And so I think, as a leader, leaning into these, and I love what you said earlier, Taylor, leaning into any of this type of support of a therapist, whoever that is for you, I think is really, really important. Jason, you want to add anything?
I have a question that comes, like, I love the pace fit bit. I love the playfulness bit. I want to come all the way back to the comment you made earlier, Taylor, about Fieldstone lurking and then supporting Ted in his leadership, but quietly, right? And from a school leadership perspective, I'll speak from my own experience. 15 years ago, I became a principal. I had a school counselor next door. School counselor would see kids all the time and occasionally staff. And I always think to myself as a school leader, I can only do my job effectively if I know exactly what's being said in that room, similar to what you're saying around, Ted and the club and Fieldstone, what's happening in that bounds of confidentiality. Now, I've come in my time to realize that that's not true or real. And I can do my job even if I don't know the bounds of all that or everything that's inside the bounds of confidentiality. What advice would you give to new school leaders, Dr. Armstrong, when thinking about the role of school counselor in our schools and how that school counselor can effectively support without, taking down the bounds of confidentiality?
Yeah, I think I was going to sort of make this other point to Garth's question, but I think it actually fits with this as well, Jason, is sort of this idea of of holding a bit of a tension between like a group's interest and an individual's interest. And at the end of the day, you're trying to, as a school counselor or principal, you're trying to create, a group that's cohesive and works together and is moving towards a common goal and sharing common values. But at the end of the day, it's a collection of individuals. And I think a school counselor or a sports psychologist or psychiatrist has to sort of walk that line where they're trying to move the group interest forward and the group strength forward and hold a unique space for each individual, that their stories are different, that the way that they see, the environment and the people in that environment and interact with those components is going to be different as well.
Awesome. I love it. And I love that this episode is named Headspace, because even your summary, Jason, was so great. It's like everyone's kind of in their own heads trying to figure some stuff out. So why don't we jump to the next segment here, which is, Taylor, we're going to ask you to rename the episode. So the original name is Headspace. What would you rename it?
So, the first thing that came to my mind to this question when I sort of know that it's in the water here with Lassoing Leadership is the first thing that came to my mind was fight or flight. So this is the response to stressful situations. And I will mention as an aside, there's actually like a third state. It's sort of fight, flight, or freeze is the third.
Oh, I've heard four.
What's your fourth?
Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Okay.
Which is like just being like really. Oh no, I'm so sorry. You're right. I'm really, really sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're right.
That's great.
I've heard
that
fourth one. Yeah.
Yeah, but the freeze is important. And in fact, Rebecca sort of represents the freeze, right? Like in her, is she going to respond to the banter message or not? Sort of like she's paralyzed in that. But anyway, I thought that was good, but I'm going to go against my sort of first multiple choice answer and actually like change it because I think there's a better one. I think that Ted offered us Close Quarters as a wonderful episode title because, there's so many close quarters in this episode, whether it's the therapy space, whether it's Keely and Roy's sort of apartment, whether it's the locker room cigarette, whether it's
Love it.
Rebecca and Sam like coming sort of nose to nose in the hallway and sort of that close quarters. So that's what I'm going with.
Okay, well, Garth,
do we even
providing
bother?
Even to, run away from this or frozen, I suspect you're going to fawn in a moment. Why don't you take a chance at upping that, even though I don't like your chances? Go for it.
I don't like my chances either, but I was really struck by Dr. Sharon Fieldstone when she said, I can't be your mentor without being your tormentor. So I would offer secondhand here, but I would offer the truth. She says, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And I love this exchange between the two. And we see it throughout this episode with Keely and Roy, Nate and Beard, and Colin, and even Jamie and Roy, even Ted and Trent Grimm. Saying the truth is what this episode is all about, to bring people out of their headspace into the world. Jason, what do you got?
Oh, I think that's the truth right there, Garth. Well done. I would offer do better. You'll remember as Nate is coming to terms with being coined the Wonder Kid, staff come into his office and he is so self-absorbed that he doesn't even look up from his phone or turn around to address them. I think this would be the leadership lesson that I would provide in all of this is, simply put down your phone or turn off your email, sit with people, look them in the eye, go for a walk. If they are asking for your attention, the least you can do is give them your attention. And Nate is missing some of these simple elements. So not only is he disrespectful, when he does turn around and speak to Colin, he's, downright mean and awful. Beard, like you said earlier, I love that you pulled that out, Garth, takes a moment and gives Nate the feedback when he needs it and simply says in that kind of stoic way, as you've said, do better.
Yeah. I don't know. I think close quarters is going to take it here, Jason, but
1,000,000%. There's no
Taylor,
question.
That was beautiful. Let's jump to our leadership challenge, Taylor. And I'm glad that Jason and I don't have to follow this one either. What is a challenge that's inspired you from this episode that we can leave with our listeners?
I take my inspiration from Jamie Tart, and he says during the practice to Roy, he referring to a teammate, he needs me to give him space in this moment. And so I guess my leadership challenge to your listeners would be maybe look for an opportunity in your role as a leader to find someone or some relationship where you can give a little more slack, you can give a little more space to help their development.
Yes.
And as a bonus challenge, I would say to do a little reflection on maybe what the reasons are that you have not already done so with that person.
Good luck, listeners. Challenge accepted. It's amazing. Amazing. Taylor, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ken, for having me. It's been great.
So great. And listeners, obviously, we want to keep guests coming on. So let us know how much you loved what Taylor had to say. A reminder that if you like what you did, if you did like what you heard here, then please rate the podcast, share it with your friends. And Jason, do we tease our next guests?
You can, if you like to, go for it.
Well, you go.
Okay, we got authors coming on next time of the article. Can Ted Lasso save teaching? And we're going to discuss the article that they wrote, and I can hardly wait to have two of them, at least, maybe all three of them, on our show in the next episode.
Yeah, so we'll link to some of the stuff that Taylor mentioned today. We'll also send out the article in advance, too. So, Taylor, can you take us home?
I'll do. Until next time, keep leading the lasso way.
Thanks, everybody.
Dr. Armstrong. Thanks, everybody.